Electric vehicles, I mean, this is said more as a personal, although I've done a bunch of investing in autonomous vehicles and so forth, because I actually think, we're all there's 40,000 deaths and a lot more injuries per year in the US alone.
Yep.
We're going to see a huge improvement on that and all this stuff. And EV will be part of it. I think one of the funny things the only thing I would say about the EVs that may not be common knowledge is that it's actually, in fact, a software revolution. It's moving cars from mechanical engineering to a software engineering
That's true.
paradigm.
Yeah.
And so what happens when the EV becomes the equivalent of a software platform that's programming for a data center that is using not just autonomous vehicles, but everything from, like, you can imagine, like, for example, a future software thing is like a person's having a heart attack on the road and it says, oh, I see the person's having a heart attack, and it immediately diverts and takes them to the hospital.
Yeah.
Right. Like that
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of thing is part of the thing. What do you see as this? Like, I completely agree with you at the beginning of the thing. What does that future curve for EVs look like?
So it's interesting. Even within EVs, as you're describing this, I feel like there are two curves. One is the software connectivity, the software platforms that are our cars. But the other is definitely the hardware,
Mhm.
which is just like every once in a while I'll test or drive a gas car. And the difference between uh like an average EV and an average gas car is it's massive. The EV is going to weigh 1,000 extra pounds. The EV is going to be 10,000 extra dollars. And the EV is going to have its certain advantages like instant torque, like more space. It might have two trunks. There's a whole bunch of things that come with that hardware platform versus the gas one. And I think interestingly, the software stuff is happening kind of at the same time, maybe just because of efficiency. If you're trying to make an autonomous car and you have a gas drivetrain, it's not able to be as responsive as just a computer on wheels. So I think that kind of coincides a little bit. But I always talk about this one thing when I make these EV reviews, which is we're so early with EVs, what are the best types of cars to go electric? Because I always use the Cadillac Escalade as an example. When you go electric, you're going to make it way heavier. You're going to make it way more expensive. You're also going to make it quieter, smoother, and more responsive to drive. So let's pick the things that are already heavy and expensive and just make them quieter and smoother and more responsive. So the Cadillac Escalade, what better car to go electric than the big, heavy, expensive 7-seater? And now they're going to make it an electric Escalade. And it's going to be great and it's going to be expensive, but it's going to be the best Escalade ever. But when you look at sports cars, the engineering of that hardware is so much harder. Sports cars are about lightweight, responsiveness. The most impressive sports car I've ever driven that's electric, the Rimac Nevera, $2 million, 2,000 horsepower.
Did they send you one of those for free?
I wish they sent one of those things.
That showed up in the parking lot last month.
Craziest car I've ever driven. But even as you drive it and you corner in that $2 million hypercar, you're like, this thing is heavy. I can feel that this thing is heavy.
Huh.
So there are certain types that are going to take much more of that curve to get to actually being good and mature. And I think we'll get there eventually. Battery tech's got to get better. The electric motor's got to get smaller and lighter. But yeah, when you talk about pickup trucks, Escalades, like we're getting the ones that make sense right off the bat, which makes sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think one of the things, I agree completely with your views. I recently got a Ford Mach-E, which I like.
Yep.
But the thing I keep watching for is when the software parts of it really start taking off. And I think it's, other than autonomous vehicles, I think it's a little too early for some of the AI stuff. Obviously, you'd have connected cloud. You can have a much better assistant. One of the things you put, for example, we mentioned Apple, you put Siri next to ChatGPT, and it's like the old dead thing versus the modern interesting thing.
Yeah.
But like envisioning what that software defined future is. Because, for example, like you can imagine the question of like what is the real time collective data map that happens from all of these cars being network devices. I mean, think about like how it fixes traffic, how it fixes like all of this stuff.
Yeah, this is one really interesting reason I think a lot of people are optimistic about Tesla specifically is because they are, I don't want to say shameless, but they are so obviously collecting so much information from all of this and training their neural net and their computers on all this information that they're getting better hand over fist at a rapid rate because of all the data they have. I kind of wonder if others are going to start doing the same thing as quickly as they have. But yeah, it's like, I remember talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson about like the future of cars could maybe just be like every car can talk to every other car and you can just take your hands off the wheel and it will communicate and weave and zigzag in a way to get to your exit in a much faster and safer way than you ever could as a human. How far away is that future? I don't know, but it feels like a software problem.